All right, so today we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Our source material is this document called 140 TB and a cloud exit, the sysadmin's nightmare of O365 data export.
Okay.
And it's about this sysadmin who finds out that
Mm.
their company is shutting down.
Oh, wow.
And as the only sysadmin,
Yeah.
they're tasked with getting all 140 terabytes of
Really?
data out of Microsoft Office 365 and back on site
Oh, gee.
before everything gets shut off.
Yikes.
I can't even imagine the stress.
I know. 140 terabytes is a lot of data.
It's an insane amount. Where do you even begin?
Well, the document actually starts with this quote from the sysadmin.
Okay.
They said they're hoping to get laid off before they even have to start this project.
Oh, wow.
It really highlights just how overwhelming this task can be,
Yeah,
especially when you consider the pressure of a company shutdown.
absolutely. So 140 terabytes is a mind-boggling amount of data. What kind of information are we even talking about?
It's basically a combination of Exchange mailboxes, SharePoint data,
Okay.
and then files stored on OneDrive.
So based
All
on...
the digital assets a company relies on,
Yeah,
but it's trapped in the cloud.
yeah.
Getting it all back safely and efficiently is, well, that's where it gets complicated.
So walk me through this.
Yep.
What are the biggest hurdles the sysadmin is facing? Can't you just hit download and call it a day?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lot more complex than that.
Okay.
The first thing is just the sheer volume of data.
Right. 140 terabytes?
Yeah, 140 terabytes is roughly equivalent to 140,000 DVDs.
Oh, wow.
Even with a fast internet connection, downloading that much data would take weeks,
Really?
if not months.
Wow. So time is definitely not on our sysadmin side. What else makes this so difficult?
We also have to consider the limitations of cloud platforms.
Okay.
Microsoft, like most cloud providers, implements throttling to prevent abuse and maintain performance for all their users.
Okay.
So basically, they limit how much data you can extract at any given time.
So even if you had like a super fast internet connection, Microsoft would still be putting on the brakes.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's like trying to drink a milkshake through a tiny straw.
Oh, okay.
You can suck as hard as you want,
Yeah,
but it's only going to come out at a certain pace.
that makes sense. Slow downloads are definitely a major obstacle. What about the technical side of things? What tools or methods are typically used for a data extraction of this magnitude?
There are a few options,
Okay.
each with their own pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
You could use e-discovery.
Okay.
It's a feature built into Office 365.
Yeah.
It's designed for extracting data for legal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
It's reliable,
Mm-hmm.
but it does have some drawbacks.
Okay.
For one, it tends to break large files into smaller chunks,
Oh, I see.
which adds to the time it takes to download everything.
So it's not just about the download speed, it's also about how the data is packaged and processed?
Right.
Are there any other methods?
You could try a direct download,
Okay.
but that can be incredibly time-consuming and prone to interruptions. We're talking about weeks of continuous downloading.
Yeah.
Any hiccup in your internet connection
Right.
could set you back hours.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got throttling, slow downloads, and potentially unreliable internet connections.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, this all has to be done within the time frame of a company shutdown.
Right.
What about the actual storage?
Yeah.
Where do you physically put 140 terabytes of data?
That's another huge challenge.
Yeah.
You could use a high-capacity NAS
Okay.
or a SAN system,
Yeah.
but those can be incredibly expensive.
Early.
The document actually mentions a Synology DS2422 Plus,
Mm-hmm.
which is a popular NAS device,
Okay.
but even a fully loaded system
Yeah.
would only hold a fraction of the data,
Oh, wow.
and it would cost a small fortune.
Wait, so what even are NAS and SAN systems? You're making me feel like I need my own deep dive just to understand the storage options.
Well, NAS stands for Network Attached Storage.
Okay.
Basically, it's a hard drive system
Yeah.
that connects to your network and allows multiple users to access files.
Okay.
A SAN, on the other hand, stands for Storage Area Network.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more complex and robust solution,
Okay.
typically used in enterprise environments.
Okay.
They both provide large storage capacities and redundancy to protect against data loss,
Gotcha.
but they come with a hefty price tag.
Right. So high cost is definitely a factor. But is there anything else we should consider when it comes to choosing a storage solution? What about just using hundreds of external hard drives? Would that work?
It's definitely a possibility,
Okay.
but imagine the logistical nightmare.
Hundreds of hard drives.
Hundreds of hard drives scattered around,
Oh my God.
each needing to be individually managed and connected,
Right.
not to mention the potential for data loss or corruption. With so many individual points of failure, you'd need a dedicated team just to keep track of it all.
It sounds like a recipe for
Yeah.
disaster. Are there any other options that are less expensive than a NAS or SANM, but more reliable than a mountain of external
Well,
drives?
there's always tape storage.
Okay.
It's incredibly affordable per gigabyte,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly slow.
Right.
And it's not practical if you need to access the data frequently.
Right.
Imagine having to search through hundreds of tapes to find a single file.
That's brutal. It's like going back to the Stone Age of data storage.
Right.
So far, we've got expensive, complicated, or slow. Are there any solutions that are actually feasible in this kind of situation? What about those cloud-to-cloud migration tools? Could they be a viable option?
Cloud-to-cloud migration tools are designed to move data between different cloud providers,
Okay.
like going from Microsoft Office 365 to Google Workspace.
Yeah,
While that's not the goal here,
right.
some of these tools might offer features that could help with data export.
Okay.
However, they often require a lot of setup and coordination with Microsoft,
Yeah.
which might not be feasible in a tight shutdown time frame.
So it's like having a fancy sports car that you can't actually drive because you don't have the keys.
Pretty much it.
This is all starting to sound pretty bleak. Are we saying that extracting this data is basically mission impossible?
Not necessarily. There are potential solutions out there,
Yeah.
but they require careful planning,
Mm-hmm.
the right tools,
Okay.
and a good understanding of the technical landscape.
Okay.
And perhaps most importantly, they require a realistic understanding of what's achievable within the given constraints.
And that brings us to the human element of this whole saga.
Yeah,
You mentioned the sysadmin's rather grim hope of being laid off.
I did.
What does that tell us about the pressure they're under and the expectations being placed on them?
I think it speaks to a common disconnect between management and IT departments.
Okay.
Management often views the cloud as the simple, magical solution,
Right.
without fully grasping the complexity that lies beneath the surface.
Yeah.
They might not understand the technical challenges involved in a project like this,
Yeah.
or the time and resources required to execute it successfully.
It's like they think you can just click your heels 3 times.
Right.
And all the data magically appears back on premises.
Exactly.
But as we've seen, the reality is far more complicated.
It is.
And when that disconnect leads to unrealistic deadlines and insufficient resources,
Yeah.
it puts immense pressure on the IT professionals who are left scrambling to make the impossible happen.
Absolutely.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some potential solutions for navigating this data migration nightmare.
So good.
So don't go anywhere. All right, so we've spent the first part of our deep dive kind of going through this 140 terabyte data migration nightmare. And it feels like every path is blocked by some obstacle, whether it's download speeds or Microsoft's throttling or just the insane cost of storage.
Right.
I'm starting to see why that sysadmin is hoping to get laid off.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But I have to believe that there are some solutions out there. What are some ways to make this task, a little bit more manageable?
Well, one of the first things you can do is prioritize the data.
Okay.
It's unlikely that you'll need all 140 terabytes immediately accessible.
Right.
By identifying the most crucial data,
Mhm.
you can significantly reduce the initial workload.
That makes sense. Focusing on the essentials first, and then you can tackle the rest later. But how do you even begin to prioritize data when a company is shutting down? Wouldn't everything suddenly become very important?
That's a good point. But even in a shutdown,
Yeah.
there's going to be data that's more critical than others.
Okay.
Think about files required for legal compliance,
Right.
financial records, essential operational data, things like that.
Okay.
You can also look at data sensitivity.
Okay.
For example, employee personal information would need to be handled with a higher level of security
Right.
than, say, marketing materials.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's about creating like a tiered system.
Exactly.
Focusing on the most critical and sensitive data first. But even with a smaller data set, we're still talking about massive amounts of information.
Right.
Are there any tools out there that can help streamline the extraction and transfer process?
There are definitely tools that can make life a little easier.
Okay.
Third-party solutions like Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365
Okay.
or Synology Active Backup.
Mm-hmm.
They offer more efficient workflows for backing up and restoring data from Office 365.
So instead of manually downloading millions of files,
Right.
these tools would automate the process and kind of handle all the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Okay.
They can handle tasks like data extraction, deduplication, and transfer,
Okay.
freeing up the sysadmin to focus on other aspects of the migration.
That makes a lot of sense.
They also often include features like incremental backups,
Okay.
which means they only back up changed data,
Okay.
saving time and bandwidth.
Gotcha. So we've got prioritization and some helpful tools to speed things along.
Right.
But what about the storage problem? We
Mm.
still need somewhere to put all this data once it's extracted. We talked about in the first part NAS and SAN, external drives, and even tape storage.
Right.
But none of them really seemed ideal for this situation.
Yeah, it's tough.
Were we missing something?
Well, there is a solution mentioned in the document. We
Okay.
haven't explored it yet.
Okay.
Microsoft's Azure Data Box.
Okay.
It's not a typical solution for this type of situation, but it could be a viable option.
Remind me what Azure Data Box is again.
Sure.
It's a Microsoft service, right?
Yes, it is.
What is it usually used for?
Azure Data Box is typically used for transferring large amounts of data into the Azure cloud.
Okay.
It's a physical device.
Okay.
Microsoft ships it to your location. You connect it to your network, transfer the data onto the device, and then ship it back to Microsoft.
Okay.
Then they upload it to your Azure storage account.
So it's like a giant hard drive in a box.
Pretty much.
You're literally shipping terabytes of data through the mail.
Essentially, yes.
Wow.
It comes in various sizes up to petabytes of capacity.
That's insane.
It's designed for situations where moving data over the internet is impractical
Okay.
due to bandwidth limitations or security concerns.
I see. But if DataBox is usually for moving data into the cloud,
Right.
how would it help in a cloud exit scenario?
Yeah,
Wouldn't we be going in the opposite direction?
you're right. The typical use case is for cloud ingress,
Okay.
meaning moving data into the cloud.
Oh,
But with the right configuration and support from Microsoft,
okay.
you can actually use Azure Databox for data export.
So you're saying you can use this service in reverse.
Exactly.
Send the box to the cloud, load it up, and bring it back down.
Yes.
That's wild. It might not be the most conventional approach,
Right.
but it's worth considering in a situation where you need to move a massive amount of data off of Office 365 quickly and securely.
Yeah.
All right, so Azure Data Box is a potential solution,
It is.
though maybe a bit unconventional.
Yeah.
What if migrating everything off of Office 365 just isn't feasible? Even with all these tools and strategies that we've talked about, are there any alternatives to completely severing ties with the cloud?
There's always the option of a hybrid approach.
Okay.
The company could maintain a minimum Office 365 licensing plan
Right.
to keep some data accessible in the cloud while migrating the most critical data on premises.
So instead of a complete breakup, it's more like a trial separation.
That's a good way to put it.
I like it.
This approach allows for a more gradual transition
Okay.
and reduces the risk of losing access to important data during the migration process.
Right.
It also provides some flexibility in case the company decides to revisit its cloud strategy in the future.
Okay. But this whole situation really highlights the need for a solid exit strategy, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It seems like a lot of companies jump into the cloud
Yeah.
without fully considering what happens if they need to leave.
Right.
Whether it's due to a shutdown or a change in strategy or even dissatisfaction with the service.
It happens more often than you think.
Really? So what else can organizations do to avoid ending up in a situation like our sysadmin?
Regularly backing up your cloud data is crucial.
Okay.
It provides a safety net in case something goes wrong with the cloud provider.
Right.
Or if you need to quickly restore data
Yeah.
due to accidental dilution or corruption,
Those things happen.
they do. And it's not just about backups.
Okay.
It's also about having clear protocols for data migration.
Okay.
Outlining the steps, involve the tools to be used, and the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved.
So it sounds like preparation is key.
It really is.
Thinking about the what-ifs and having a plan in place before disaster strikes.
Exactly.
But even with the best laid plans, there's always that chance that things can go wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
What about the human element in all of this?
Right.
What can IT professionals learn from the sysadmin's experience?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of communication.
Okay.
IT professionals need to be proactive in setting realistic expectations with management about what's achievable within given constraints.
Okay.
Explain the complexities of data migration, the potential costs, the time involved.
Yeah.
Don't let the perceived simplicity of the cloud mask the reality of what it takes to manage data effectively.
So it's about educating management,
Right.
making sure they understand the scope of the challenge and the resources needed to address it.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to push back against unrealistic deadlines or demands.
I agree.
And it's also about advocating for the right resources,
Yeah.
including investing in robust backup solutions and training for IT staff.
That's right.
Spending a little bit up front can save a lot of pain and expense down the line.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Right. And ultimately, that leads to a less stressful and more manageable situation for everyone involved.
I agree.
So in the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll explore the broader implications of this cloud exit story and what it means for the future of data management.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned. So welcome back to our deep dive. I think it's been a wild ride so far.
It has.
We've talked about the technical and logistical hurdles of, migrating all this data out of the cloud during a company shutdown. But amidst all the talk of, throttling and storage solutions and third-party tools, there's one thing I think we haven't fully addressed.
And what's that?
The human element.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Of these types of situations. It's easy to get lost in the technical weeds.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's people who are tasked with, executing these complex projects.
Absolutely.
I mean, the sysadmin in our source document, they joked about hoping to be laid off before having to deal with it. And that sentiment, while delivered with humor, speaks volumes about the pressure and stress that IT professionals face.
It really does.
I mean, I think a lot of IT professionals out there can probably relate to that feeling.
For sure.
They're often the ones left to clean up the messes
created
by poor planning or unrealistic expectations from management.
It's true.
And when those messes involve, moving mountains of data under tight deadlines, it's no wonder they're feeling a little overwhelmed.
I can understand that.
I think one thing that really strikes me about the story is the disconnect between management's perception of the cloud and the reality of what it takes to manage data.
Exactly.
I mean, it's easy to think of the cloud as this magical, effortless solution, but as we've seen, that's not always the case.
Definitely not.
It's like they think you can just snap your fingers.
Right.
And the data will magically teleport wherever you want it to go.
Yeah, just poof, it's there.
But the reality is much more complicated.
It is.
And it requires careful planning, the right tools, and a deep understanding of the technical intricacies. And when management doesn't fully grasp those complexities, that can lead to unrealistic deadlines, insufficient resources, and ultimately burnout for the IT staff.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it really highlights the need for better communication and understanding between IT departments and the rest of the organization. I mean, IT professionals really need to be empowered to push back against unrealistic demands, explain the complexities of these projects in clear terms, advocate for the resources that they need to succeed.
It's so important.
It's about fostering a culture of collaboration where management understands and values the expertise of IT professionals.
It's not about magic wands and quick fixes.
No.
It's about recognizing that, effective data management requires planning and expertise and the right tools.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So I think you know this story. While it's centered on a very specific situation, it does raise some broader questions about the evolving relationship between businesses and their data in the cloud.
Absolutely.
I mean, as more companies embrace cloud services,
Yeah.
it's really crucial, I think, to consider the long-term implications of,
Yeah.
data ownership and accessibility and control.
That's a great point.
I think it's a point worth pondering for anyone who uses cloud services,
Yeah.
whether for business or personal use.
For sure.
What happens if you need to switch providers?
Right.
What happens if you decide to move some data back on premises?
Exactly.
Do you have a plan in place for that?
You have to think about those things.
These are questions we can't ignore.
I agree.
The cloud offers incredible convenience and scalability.
It does.
But it also comes with its own set of considerations.
For sure.
And by being aware of those considerations and planning accordingly, we can mitigate those risks and make sure that our data remains a valuable asset,
Absolutely.
not a potential liability.
Yeah. I think that's a great point to end on.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey into the depths of cloud exits.
Yeah. This has been a fun one.
I hope you found it insightful, maybe a little bit eye-opening.
Yeah, for sure.
And remember, if you have any thoughts or experiences you'd like to share about data migration challenges, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Until next time,
Okay.
keep exploring, keep learning,
Yeah.
and keep those data escape routes open.
Sounds good.